Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop trying so hard is the exact moment someone starts trying harder for you? Think about that for a second, because if you're honest with yourself, you already know it's true. You've watched it happen. Maybe not to you, maybe to a friend, a coworker, a woman at a party who wasn't even trying to be noticed, and yet every man in the room somehow ended up orbiting around her anyway. She wasn't chasing anyone, she was just living. And somehow that was the most magnetic thing in the room. And maybe, if we're being really honest, there's a quieter question underneath all of this. A question you don't say out loud, but one that sits with you late at night. What does she have that I don't? Here's what I want you to sit with before we go any further. It's not her face. It's not her body. It's not her income, her Instagram, or her ability to say the perfectly witty thing at the perfectly right moment. It's something invisible, something underneath the surface, something you can't buy, can't fake for long, and can't borrow from someone else's life. It's a mindset. And in the next 38 minutes, I'm going to hand you 5 of them. 5 internal shifts that once you actually absorb them, change the entire way people experience you. Not just men, everyone. Because confidence isn't a dating strategy. It's a frequency, and frequencies attract. So stay with me here, because by the end of this video, you are going to understand something that most women spend their entire lives chasing and never quite catch. Let's begin. I want to start with the pain, because I think you deserve honesty before you get hope. If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you've felt it. That specific, hollow ache of being the one who cares more. The one who texts first and then waits and waits and rereads the conversation, trying to find the moment where you said too much or not enough or the wrong thing entirely. You've probably lain in bed at 1 a.m. scrolling through a conversation that ended 3 hours ago, trying to decode a single word choice like it was a locked vault holding the truth about whether he actually likes you. Maybe you've shown up early for someone who never quite showed up for you at all. Maybe you've shrunk yourself, your opinions, your needs, your plans, just to seem easier to love, easier to keep, easier to hold on to. And in return, you got someone who took you for granted, someone who disappeared for days and reappeared like nothing happened, someone who made you feel like gratitude for crumbs was the price of staying in the room. And underneath all of that is a much deeper wound, isn't it? It's not really about him. It's about the fear that maybe you're too much or not enough. That if you stopped performing, stopped adjusting, stopped softening, stopped chasing, there'd be nothing left worth staying for. I want you to know something right now, before we go any further, that fear is common. It is not unique to you, and it is not a reflection of your worth. It's a symptom of something almost every woman has been quietly taught, that love is something you earn through effort, through availability, through being endlessly understanding, that your value goes up the more you give and the less you ask for in return. But here's the truth nobody told you. That belief is exactly what's been repelling the very thing you want. So let's talk about the reframe, the one idea that's going to restructure everything else in this video. Men are not chasing women because those women are trying harder. They're chasing women who have stopped performing for approval and started living for themselves. Let that sink in, because it's the opposite of almost everything dating culture has taught you. Here's an analogy that might make this click. Think about a mountain. Nobody chases a mountain because the mountain begs to be climbed. Nobody looks at Everest and thinks, wow, it's really working hard to get my attention. The mountain just exists. It stands there, solid, unmoved by weather, unmoved by who's watching, unmoved by whether anyone climbs it at all today or ever. And that stillness, that complete indifference to being chosen, is precisely what makes people want to conquer it. Confidence works the same way. The mindset shift isn't, how do I become more attractive to him? It's, how do I become so rooted in myself that his presence becomes a bonus, not a requirement? That single shift changes your posture, your voice, your patience, your standards, everything. And men feel that shift before they even understand why they're feeling it. This is the emotional center of everything we're about to cover. 5 mindsets, all of them variations on one core idea. You were never supposed to be the one chasing. You were supposed to be the mountain. Let's get into the first mindset, and I think this one is going to sting a little, in a good way. Mindset 1. Your validation lives inside you, not inside his replies. Most women, without even realizing it, have outsourced their sense of worth to someone else's phone. You feel good about yourself when he texts back quickly. You feel anxious when he doesn't. Your entire emotional weather system becomes dependent on someone else's availability. And here's the cruel irony. The more your mood depends on his response, the less appealing your presence becomes, because people can feel dependency. It has a scent, and it does not smell like confidence. It smells like scarcity. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Maya. Maya was seeing a man for about 4 months. Every text he sent, she analyzed. Every delayed reply sent her into a spiral. She'd ask friends to interpret his one-word answers like they were ancient scripture. And the more she analyzed, the more he pulled back. Not because he didn't like her, but because he could feel the pressure of being someone's entire emotional support system. One day, Maya got busy. Genuinely busy. A work deadline, a family emergency, life just happening. She didn't have the bandwidth to obsess over his texts anymore. And within a week, he was the one initiating. He was the one asking why she seemed different. He was the one, for the first time, chasing. What changed? Not her looks, not her personality. Her attention simply returned home to her own life, her own priorities, her own emotional center of gravity. And that return, that quiet self-sufficiency, is one of the most attractive forces that exists between two people. Here's the emotional insight underneath this. The moment you need someone's approval to feel okay, you've handed them the steering wheel to your own emotional life. And nobody, no matter how much they like you, wants to drive a car that isn't theirs. But when your validation is internal, when you feel whole with or without a reply, you become someone people want to be around, not someone people feel responsible for managing. Remember this line because it matters. Confidence isn't built when people choose you. It's built when you choose yourself first, every single day, regardless of who's watching. Mindset 2. Boundaries are not walls. They're the shape of your self-respect. A lot of women confuse being agreeable with being lovable. So they say yes when they mean no. They accept behavior that hurts them because they're afraid that objecting will make them seem difficult, dramatic, or too much. And slowly, without noticing, they train the people around them to believe their limits don't exist. Here's an analogy. Think of a garden. A garden without a fence gets trampled, not necessarily out of malice, but because there's nothing signaling where the path ends and the flower bed begins. People walk where there's no resistance. It's not usually cruelty. It's just physics. Human behavior follows the path of least resistance. And if you never signal where your line is, people will keep walking straight through it, assuming that's simply the terrain. Boundaries are the fence, not to keep people out, but to protect what's growing inside. And here's what's fascinating. Men respect boundaries far more than they respect endless accommodation. A woman who says, "I'm not comfortable with that," calmly, without apology, without over-explaining, signals something enormously attractive. She knows her own worth well enough to protect it. I think of a woman named Priya, who spent years being the understanding one in every relationship. Understanding when he cancelled plans last minute. Understanding when he took hours to reply. Understanding when he was inconsistent about what he wanted. She thought her flexibility was a virtue, but the men in her life read it as a lack of self-respect and treated her accordingly. Not out of cruelty, but because she had, without meaning to, taught them that her time and feelings were negotiable. The turning point came when she started saying, simply and without drama, "That doesn't work for me." No lecture, no guilt trip, just a clear, calm line. And what she noticed was startling. The same men who used to treat her casually started showing up on time, communicating better, making more effort, because boundaries don't push people away. They filter out who was never serious, and they raise the standard for who remains. Here's a line worth remembering. The word no is not rejection. It's information. And people who actually value you will adjust to that information instead of resenting it. Mindset 3. Emotional availability is not the same as emotional accessibility to everyone. This one's subtle, so stay with me. There's a difference between being warm and being open to anyone who shows minimal interest. A lot of women confuse being nice with being open to everyone equally. But real confidence includes discernment, the understanding that your time, your emotional energy, and your presence are not unlimited resources to be handed out to whoever asks. Think of it like a business partnership. Would a smart entrepreneur invest capital in every single person who pitched them an idea, regardless of how flaky, inconsistent, or unclear that person's intentions were? Of course not. They'd evaluate. They'd watch actions over time. They'd invest only where there was demonstrated reliability and mutual respect. And yet in dating, so many women invest their emotional capital in men who have shown through their actions that they're inconsistent, unclear, or simply not that invested because they're afraid that discernment will make them seem cold or too picky. Here's the truth. Discernment is not coldness. It's self-respect with structure. A woman who protects her emotional energy for people who've earned it rather than people who simply asked for it, becomes exponentially more valuable in the eyes of the people around her. Because scarcity, real scarcity, not manufactured game playing, naturally increases perceived value. I want to tell you about a woman named Fatima. Fatima used to give her full emotional presence to almost anyone who showed interest. Long calls, deep conversations, vulnerability, all within the first few weeks. And time again, the men she opened up to fastest were the ones who disappeared fastest because they hadn't earned that depth. And depth given too early often isn't valued the way depth given gradually is. When Fatima shifted, when she started pacing her emotional investment to match the consistency she was actually seeing rather than the potential she was imagining, everything changed. Men who weren't serious lost interest quickly, which she now saw as useful information rather than heartbreak. And the men who were serious rose to meet her because they could feel that her presence wasn't handed out freely, it was earned. Remember this, warmth without discernment is not kindness. It's an open door with no lock. And the people who matter most will actually respect you more when there's a door to knock on. Mindset 4. Your life needs to be full enough that a relationship is an addition, not a rescue. This might be the single most important mindset in this entire video. So let's slow down here. So many women enter relationships from a place of emotional deficit, looking for someone to complete a sense of identity, purpose, or worth that feels incomplete on its own. And when you enter a relationship needing it to fill a void, you become dependent on that person's presence in a way that quietly unsettles most men, even if they can't articulate why. Because nobody wants to be someone's entire oxygen supply. It's exhausting, and eventually, it's suffocating for both people. Here's an analogy. Think of two campfires. One is barely lit, gasping for more fuel just to survive, desperately pulling in any spark nearby to keep from going out. The other is already roaring, steady, warm, self-sustaining. Which fire do you want to sit near? Which fire do you trust won't go out the moment the wind shifts? People are drawn to warmth that doesn't need saving. They're quietly wary of fires that are one gust away from collapse. I think about a woman named Zara, who after a difficult breakup spent an entire year rebuilding, not looking for a new relationship, but building a full, textured, independent life. She reconnected with old friends. She started a small business she'd always wanted to try. She traveled, she read, she built routines that made her feel proud of her own days, regardless of whether anyone else witnessed them. And somewhere in that year, without trying, she became magnetic. Not because she changed her face or her wardrobe, but because her presence radiated a kind of wholeness that made people want to be part of her life rather than fix it. This is the deepest secret of natural attraction. People don't chase women who need rescuing. They chase women whose lives are already so full that being invited in feels like a genuine privilege. Here's a line worth sitting with. Don't build your life around finding love. Build a life so rich that love simply finds room to walk in. Mindset 5. You are allowed to walk away, and that willingness is where your power actually lives. This is the final mindset, and in many ways, it's the foundation that makes the previous 4 possible. So many women stay in situations that hurt them because leaving feels scarier than staying, even when staying is slowly eroding their sense of self. And the tragic irony is that the fear of losing someone often becomes the very thing that makes you lose yourself first. Here's an analogy. Think of a storm. You can't control when it arrives, how long it lasts, or how loud it gets. But you can control whether you stand out in the open, getting soaked and battered, or whether you walk toward shelter. Staying in a relationship that consistently disrespects you is choosing to stand in the storm out of fear that shelter doesn't exist elsewhere. But shelter always exists. It might just require the courage to walk toward it instead of waiting for the storm to apologize. There's a woman named Amara whose story illustrates this beautifully. She spent nearly 2 years with a man who was affectionate in public and distant in private, who made promises about the future but never followed through with present tense effort. She stayed because leaving felt like admitting failure. But one evening, after yet another cancelled plan and a half-hearted apology, something in her simply settled. Not anger, something quieter and stronger, clarity. She realized she wasn't afraid of losing him anymore. She was afraid of losing more of herself by staying. She left, not dramatically, not to punish him, but because she finally valued her own peace more than the fear of being alone. And here's what's remarkable. Though it's almost a side note compared to the real transformation, he did come back, weeks later, finally ready to show up the way he should have all along. But by then, Amara had already discovered something more valuable than his return. She'd discovered that she could survive walking away. And that discovery, more than any relationship ever could, was what made her unshakable from that point forward. Here's the line to remember. The problem isn't that they left or that you're afraid they might. The problem is staying emotionally in a place that no longer honors you long after your instincts already told you it was time to go. So let's bring this together. 5 mindsets. Internal validation instead of outsourced approval. Boundaries as self-respect instead of walls. Discernment instead of unconditional emotional access. A full life instead of an emotional deficit waiting to be filled. And the willingness to walk away as the foundation beneath everything else. Here's what I want you to actually do with this, starting today. Pick one relationship or situation in your life right now where you've been outsourcing your peace to someone else's behavior. Just one. And ask yourself honestly, what would it look like to hand that peace back to yourself? Not through a dramatic confrontation, not through games, not through pretending you don't care when you do, but through quietly, steadily, redirecting your energy back toward your own life, your own goals, your own sense of worth. Start small. The next time you feel the urge to double text out of anxiety, pause and ask yourself what you actually need in that moment, and try giving it to yourself first. The next time you feel pressure to say yes to something that doesn't sit right, practice the sentence, "Let me think about that," and give yourself permission to mean it. These are small acts, but small acts repeated daily are what rebuild the foundation underneath your confidence. Confidence was never a personality trait some women are born with and others aren't. It's a practice. It's built one honest choice at a time. I want to leave you with this. You were never meant to spend your life auditioning for love. You were meant to live so fully, so rooted in your own worth, that love simply recognizes itself in you and decides to stay. The chasing was never supposed to come from you. It was supposed to come toward you, because you'd already become someone worth chasing, not through tricks or games, but through the quiet, steady work of choosing yourself first. You are not too much. You were never too much. You were simply giving your fullness to people who hadn't yet learned how to receive it. And the moment you turn that fullness back toward your own life, the right people will find their way to you, not because you chased them, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself long enough for them to see who you really are. If this video meant something to you, if even one of these mindsets landed somewhere real, hit subscribe, because we go deep into this world every single week. Real psychology, real stories, real transformation. And if you're watching this and one of these 5 mindsets is the one you personally need to work on most, tell me in the comments which one it was. I read every single one, and I genuinely love to know which part of this hit closest to home for you. I'll see you in the next video.